playing on a tennis court, stuck inside a husk of lemon pledge. DMZ in the hot sun. This tennis ball's too pretty to harm. Oh, Enfield long. Millicent Kent. Oh, Enfield long. Welcome to the I Hate Infinite Jest podcast, episode 10 with Charlotte Mark. How are you guys doing today? Charlotte is the first of the fan viewers. She was just like one of you. She's in the middle of reading Infinite Jest for the first time. She reached out and said, hey, can I be on the show? I said, sure. So, episode 10, pages 270 to 299. In this episode, we will be talking about Don Gately over there at Ennet House. We will be talking about Jeffrey Day, a character that me and Charlotte both agree needs to be smashed in the head with a brick. The sooner the better, I'd say. Dear God, I hated Jeffrey Day so much. I was reminded of every, just discovered atheism at 19. Jesus wasn't born in December, right? I bet you feel stupid. One of those assholes who says, I'm going to live my life by cliches now. Because living your life by a cliche is a stupid thing to do. Even though, I'm apparently living my life by seeing how much poison I can fit into my liver on a nightly basis. We talk about Oren. We get a little bit of the backstory on Oren here. Not only how Oren went from tennis to football, but also how he met the PGOAT prettiest girl of all time, Joelle, as she was twirling a baton on the side. I think this is probably our most analytic episode. Charlotte, I believe she said, has an English degree, literature degree. So yeah, we really got into it. I actually had to take a break in the middle of recording because we went a little long, and mine, if you remember, footnote 1, This Is Water, I had on my lovely girlfriend, Pretty Perry Lerner. She is in the other room watching Pocahontas, and I'm gonna go in and watch it with her as soon as this is done. We're gonna watch the shit out of Pocahontas. It's gonna be great. So she and I had a plan yesterday that our mothers were going to meet for the first time. Yeah, it's getting serious. Meeting of the moms. She's gonna meet the dad next, but because I no longer have a father figure around, let's start with the moms, see where it goes, figure it out. Our moms liked each other quite a bit. We went up to Olives. Well, we picked up food from Olives in Princeton, New Jersey, where they have incredible hummus. Anybody on the East Coast, if you're ever in Princeton, stop by the Olives restaurant, because pretty much everything they have there is amazing and delicious. So our moms got along. While we were there, we talked about the podcast, and Perry's mom said we were so adorable together and our relationship is so cute. And other people said that. Charlotte said that when I explained why we had to stop recording, because I had to run and do that to drive 45 minutes. Tell you what was revealed there, though. Asked my mother if she listened to the episode with cousin Frank, who was her sister's son. She said, yeah, did. Didn't care for it. Turns out, guys, I have been telling jokes on stage about being white trash for 3 years now. I think that was actually a turn in my comedy career when I started talking about my background, because I realized that everybody I was meeting in the comedy scene was like the sons of teachers and lawyers and shit like that. And somehow they weren't reacting well to me going on stage and just acting like a lunatic, saying like, yeah, my mom's going to die one day. Here's why I think that's good. And it wasn't until I really started getting into my background. Like, I have a joke I tell, but it's a true story. Well, for starters, my dad, growing up, my father was in a biker gang. And before that, he had worked for a mobster who lived next door to him in southern New Jersey, a Mr. Giaquinto, who I didn't meet until I was 16 because he'd been away on a vacation for double murder. What? So yeah, my dad ran with the biker gang. When I was 12 years old, my dad got really, really drunk and admitted to me just talking that when he was in his early 20s, just before I was born, he had gotten in a fist fight at a bar and was pretty sure he killed the guy and just never got caught for it. In his exact words, like, yeah, we started rumbling and kicked him in the head, and he, went on with the rest of the fight. And like 10 minutes later, I look over and he still hadn't gotten up. So I just don't go to Dominic's anymore. Yeah, so that was, 50% of the people who raised me. So my mom didn't understand. Like, I feel like you're talking shit on the family, specifically me. And once I point out, like, oh, no, mom, this was 100% dad's side of the family. She's like, okay. And even that's not fair. It's just my dad being a lunatic. I mean, my mom did let, her fuck up best friend and her 3 daughters just live with us for 2 years. That wasn't really good. They were, let's just say, pretty low on give them a totem pole. They'd be low on it. Probably not the best thing to grow up around, but whatever. So the point is, squash it over with mom. Mom, you're not white trash. You just raised me around a lot of it. And it's just a lot easier shorthand to say, I come from white trash, because it makes people understand me more. Like why I don't understand this intellectual book called Infinite Jest by super smart boy David Foster Wallace. I don't get it. That's a lie. It's getting better. It's getting better as we go. But again, like we get into it in this, but like there is no reason this book couldn't have been this engaging from page 1. All right, like he clearly had the skill. He just fucked about, and that's why we're getting this in depth on Don Gately on page 270 when it should have been there on page 50, and then it wouldn't have been such a goddamn slog crawling up this hill. All right, I think I bullshitted enough. Charlotte Mark. Episode 10, pages let me check, I already forget. 270 to 299. Let's get to it. Enfield Line. Yeah, books. Guys, follow me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook at Jesse Dram. Please like I Hate Infinite Jest podcast on Facebook. Follow me on Reddit at Diamond Joe Quim. Again, it's not supposed to be dirty. I ran out of characters. Diamond Joe Quim. Send me an email at jessedram@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, hire a fucking skywriter. Tell people to listen to this podcast. I'm starving. I need to make $18s of dollars, and I need to get some more viewers. Don't look at me like that, Perry. All right, bye. Here we are, episode 10, the I Hate Infinite Jest podcast. Our guest this week, the first fan guest we've had. This is Charlotte Mark. Charlotte, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here.
Same. Yeah, so you reached out to me via Instagram pretty much to say that you were digging the podcast and you loved Infinite Jest and you wanted to come on, and I said, yeah, okay, sure, and here we are. Why don't you tell us a little bit of your literary background? What you like, how you first even heard of this book, and what made you reach out and want to be part of the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the time that I reached out, there hadn't been any women on the podcast, which has since then changed, or that maybe there had been only one woman, and I was like, dying to talk about the treatment of women in the book. So that was kind of the thing that prompted me to reach out, first of all. But just a little bit about my background. I did graduate with an English degree. I was kind of starting to pursue PhD, but got sucked into white collar slavedom instead, but still do very much enjoy literature. My emphasis was in medieval and Renaissance studies. So I do have some background in Shakespeare, which to me has kind of been an interesting reading of Infinite Jest, looking at from the lens of kind of Hamlet and, maybe where some parallels there. But otherwise, I was introduced by David Foster Wallace well, let me ask you, how do you think I was introduced to David Foster Wallace in Infinite Jest?
I'm willing to guess at some point a guy who, I'm just going to take a swing and say a bit more brains than brawn, suggested that maybe you should look into this thing. I mean, no big deal. It changed my life, but I'm an exceptional individual. So maybe you'll get something out of it.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, white man told me to read this. So
a white guy, I never pictured that.
A white dude, yeah, that's very surprising to you, I'm sure. But
I do feel a little bad bashing on white guys, just being a white guy, just because it kind of ranks like I'm not like other girls. But I mean, if ever a group had it coming,
I know. So, I actually dated someone in college who was a huge David Foster Wallace fan, and Infinite Jest was like his Bible. And so he encouraged me to read it. I never read it when he told me to. I did read some of the essays, and then later on ended up finally reading it, putting it down after 100 pages, being like, this is dog shit. And then picked it back up in quarantine, basically saying, you know what, if not now, then when, basically.
Yeah, looking on social media, a lot of people were finally, this was the impetus to finally get going on this book. So.
Yeah, what the fuck else are we going to do, right?
Very true. Very true. I mean, the world's on fire. Why not curl up with a nice book that feels like the flames of hell nipping at your heels?
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have anything to promote or social media? I honestly have no idea if you have any. No? All right. Perfect.
No. If you guys want to talk about the book, none of my friends want to talk to me about it. So they're like, please don't fucking mention Infinite Jest around me. So if anyone wants to chat on the book, my handle is Charlotte J. Mark. I'm happy to kind of talk about the book with you guys, but otherwise, no, nothing at all to promote.
Okay. See, that actually has been the fun, is just talking, not even just about this book. I miss talking about books with people. For whatever reason, my particular friend group are just not big readers. They're all into comic books, which I've been a little mean and just said like, well, comic books, I mean, they're books for people who can't read good, which is mean, but like, I don't have a single friend who loves comic books that like, if you threw like a Vonnegut book in front of them, they couldn't finish it. It is a matter of ability and not preference, but
damn, now we know where you stand with the comic book nerds.
I mean, they're allowed to listen. I love so many that's part of the purpose of this podcast. I love so many things that are stupidly indefensible. I went back and I watched, it was the 9-year anniversary of one of the greatest pro wrestling matches I've ever seen in my life. And I went back and watched it last night, and I felt so many emotions, and I was transported, and it filled me with beautiful feelings of how great the world can be. And it's indefensibly fucking stupid. And I wish more people took that approach with this book, which I guess they kind of are now. But anyway,
we're certainly not taking it seriously. So
yeah, the only I be sure somewhere in here we really, unfortunately, if we really wanted to get in with women, there's not a lot of women in the section we're discussing. But I do really want your take on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. You won't have to ask me twice.
Okay. All right. So wherever you feel that. So pages today, part 10, 270 to 299. Our first chunk is page 270 to 281, where we meet a motherfucking loser named Jeffrey Day. I have been tweeting all week. I really hope that Don Gately just uppercuts him and knocks off his lower jaw at some point, and that's just the end. Maybe that'll be the end of the book. You mentioned what are your feelings on Jeffrey Day?
Yeah, Jeffrey Day also makes me want to punch someone in the face, but I think that that's kind of the point. I mean, I think that the purpose of Jeffrey Day is to show this subset of people in AA that are just there because they have to be there. It reminds me of kind of being in high school, and I had this like group of stoner friends, and they're like, you just go from worshiping a substance to worshiping God, man. Like it's not, yeah, it's like this very, yeah. And so he's insufferable, but I do see the purpose that maybe the reason for having him is to kind of voice DFW's own reservations about AA before maybe getting recovery or whatever, which I think is interesting. It's the footnote around him and Don Gately's conversation, I think, is really hysterical, which we can talk
about. That's
about.
A good one.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into some of the nitty gritty, and we'll converse as comes up. So Jeffrey Day is a new resident at Enfield and is frankly a pain in the ass. Gately's AA sponsor says Day, quote, could end up being an invaluable teacher of patience and tolerance for him. He has come to Enfield at 46 years of age and proudly declared he is there to learn to live by cliches. Quote, one day at a time, thy will not mine be done. It works if you work it. Pretty much the too cool for school dipshit who shows up and sarcastically starts sticking it to the phonies, though again, just another addict on the pile himself. The woman trying to speak to him, Charlotte Treat, looks to Gately for some sort of staff enforcement of dogma. Gately, here's a little something. This is the actual text. Gately thinks the bitch is clueless, but then again, so is everybody else, and probably Gately himself most days. This is our first time really getting into Gately's head, and I love it. I'm seeing a bit too much of myself, of just harsh criticism and judgment, and then immediately followed like, well, then again, I guess I don't really know shit, so...
Yeah, I love him. There is a little bit of hints of racism sometimes in Gately's own internal monologues as well. And you kind of see, yeah, that maybe he comes from quite a different background than a lot of the other kind of like academic characters in the book.
Well, that is something... I won't spend too much time on it, but it's been a thing in the comedy scene. As I mentioned before, I'm a stand-up. But I was really, when I first started, just realizing what a different background I come from these people, just because there's a lot of, not, I hate to use the term PC as like a pejorative, but, in individual small groups, particularly in arts, there's going to be people who just, they're out for whatever. And one of the things I noticed, just because I do discuss racism, I have a lot of racist people in my family, including my father, who's no longer with me. But I do realize that, like, it seems like a lot of people who are extremely into, like, the judgment side of politics, like, oh, you never had to, like, love a racist, Like, I've never seen the good in throwing those people out because I've always seen the good in them. And it's like, just you can nudge him towards something good. So that's why I actually kind of like Don Gately having that aspect of him, especially something that's considered like such a malignant, unfit, like modern day, like, oh, this is my uncle, he's a racist. Like, okay, never need to hear another word about him.
Yeah, it does make him more human. You see that there is a spectrum there where he does have some like really redeeming qualities, but there also are other things that have come up that, aren't as great.
Right. Great quote on banal cliches and their importance. Quote, the I didn't know that I didn't know is another of the slogans that looks so shallow for a while and then all of a sudden drops off and deepens like the lobster waters off the North Shore. I really love the defensive cliches in this book, particularly this section. I am a big fan of them. Do you have any particular cliche that, no matter how overblown or overused, still has like some meaning to you or still like hits you somewhere?
My dad always says, my dad is like just like 80 series of cliches in a conversation. He kind of speaks in cliches also. Okay. He has the same stories that he tells over and over and over again, which are his kind of parables. And then his proverbs are these cliches. And one of them is, it is what it is. And I love that one.
Mm-hmm. I have, as far as sayings, this is one I actually developed with a nephew of mine. So it's mine, but it is very much slogan-y. which is when you're dealing with a little kid, like to tell them like, hey, quit being stupid. You're not stupid, okay? You're smart, which is why I'm holding you to this standard. Like really hold them to that. But and even, well, yeah.
I love that.
Okay. Gately reminds himself that Enfield's primary purpose is to buy these poor yutzes some time, some thin pie slice of abstinent time, till they can start to get a whiff of what's true and deep under the shallow surface of what they're trying to do, the slow, dull machinations that do eventually lead to enlightenment. Yeah, I don't know if you have any personal history with this, but as somebody who has a lot of family that is in AA, I do have an appreciation for this type of stuff, just because, and that's why this character is so infuriating. He's like, have you ever seen like a new atheist in their early 20s and just
Yeah.
and just all they have to add to the kind of, yeah, if Jesus was born, he wasn't born on Christmas. It's like, yeah, okay, it's people are getting something out of this. Why are you taking a dump on it? That kind of thing. And just like these dull cliches, like they do, it's easy to show up and shit on something, but like to actually do the work, much like a cliche, is a dull thing you just have to do every day until it starts working. And you're not, and he does make the point that he's pretty much starting shit to, in his mind, if he can make them angry, then that proves like, see, I'm not like them. I don't belong here.
Right. And maybe he'll get kicked out too, is something that we learn about. But I think something we learn about later about Don Gately is that he too came to the program as a skeptic, and then he just showed up. And then over time, the need to use substances was relieved, and he doesn't know how it happened. And so I think that he's a believer in this kind of go, like, make your body go and your mind will follow kind of thing. Just like show up and then the rest will take care of itself.
Right. And I do like him portrayed as like this simple guy, but like he does want the change. So he's just kind of, and that's, a lot of the things you see when it comes to people in AA, where it's like, it's not fun. It's hard work. One of the things I'm jumping ahead a little bit. One of the things I loved in this chapter that I actually have never heard before was the addict's comparison of quitting, of getting sober, as like a kind of heartbreak, actually, where it honestly applied to me in some old relationships, like some toxic relationships that like, you get away from for 6 months and you're finally feeling good. And then, you relapse for like that little hit of endorphin. And then it's like, oh, I have to restart the whole goddamn process of losing this person again, because I can't have this. Like, this is so bad for me. But then every time you go back for it, it's just a reset and you're stuck on it again. And just, yeah, that look at addiction was really, I got to give DFW some points. That's a good one right there.
Yeah, for people that aren't an addict like myself, he does a really good job of depicting what the addict goes through in its entirety of that experience. He also has, I know in your last podcast you covered this, but he talks about the tourist, like the person who's not really an addict, but just like takes a hit of things and is like, woo, that was fun. I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. Like I'm like so not an addict. So yeah, having this context is like really, really amazing for someone who isn't in the disease.
Oh yeah, no, those are definitely the infuriating people that I've met people do this with cocaine in the past. They're just like, they don't get anything. I think I was actually lucky the one and only time I tried cocaine. It was like going down a water slide. That's like, okay, that was fine. I think I'm good. But I understand as far as like, yeah, just the fury if you're somebody who gets so much release from any kind of drug, and to see somebody else that's just like, yeah, no, I'm just going to treat this as like a fun thing I do today. And like, woo, take my brain on a roller coaster ride. And that's it.
Exactly.
Whatever. Jeffrey Day is described as a red wine and quaalude man who's here because he nodded out at the wheel, smashed his sob through a sporting goods store. Did not realize that was a tongue twister when I wrote that note. Smashed his sob through a sporting goods store window and decided to peruse the merchandise while waiting for the authorities, here referred to as capital, the finest, how twee, to come fetch him. Enfield staff determines he's mostly been in and out of blackouts for the last several years. Good quote here, it's the newcomers with some education that are the worst. They identify their whole selves with their head, and the disease makes its command headquarters in the head, which is a bit of a shade of This Is Water, where he was talking about the head making a great slave but a terrible master. And yeah, I get that, where like coming in with that little bit of knowledge can really mess you up when you're trained. It's almost a bad thing to be trained to look at. So it can be a bad thing to be trained to look at something from every angle, as opposed to just throwing yourself into the process of something.
I keep on seeing This Is Water after hearing your podcast on it. I keep on seeing it in this text talking about, the worship of things. Like, what are you going to worship? You get to choose. And that's a very, very spiritual speech. And it's made me think of Infinite Jest as a spiritual text in a way that, like I mentioned before, is almost biblical for some people for that reason.
Right. I get that. And I've actually read some articles, I can't remember where specifically, that just I feel like as a modern younger people, we've gotten rid of religion from our lives a lot. I'm trying to work on a bit that's like how strange that would be to anyone else, that like if you went back 30 years, not having a religion would be like not having a cell phone today. It's like, well,
right.
What are you going to do if something bad happens? Like, where do you turn to for answers? But yeah, the fact that I feel like a lot of our generation has gotten rid of religion, but they haven't replaced it with anything. And there is some human need for like ritual for I feel like particularly younger liberal people who get very much into activism, like that becomes their religion in a sense, which is why to have any disagreement, you see the reaction they have. While I'm sure they like to paint it as moral and intellectual, the feeling they're feeling is blasphemy more than anything else. Which I'm not the first to say this. I'm regurgitating something I read somewhere and can't source, and this is why I didn't make it through college. These are all just caveats, but interesting things, and that's why I think even things like this, like Infinite Jest, little. I'm glad people have their little secular Bibles, as long as it's telling them good things. Preaching empathy is good wherever you get it.
Well, I think we'll know when we finish the book, like, what's the point? I think that's the big question mark I have, because I'm only halfway through. Okay,
you haven't finished it yet either.
I haven't. No.
I'm really curious about people who have read the book through and through, who are listening to this, and they're probably like, "Oh, you dumb piece of shit! You don't even know what's going to happen there." I know episode 7.
Sorry to the people who finished the book. Okay, we're sorry. We're doing the best we can.
We'll see you on the other side when we've been fully assimilated and are one of us.
Exactly.
Okay. Footnote 90, 3 pages long, which is this one I actually thought was pretty weird. They turned into a footnote because it could have. I guess it's happening in a different chronology, but conversation between Jeffrey and Gately that they had before this. Jeffrey is shitting on the program without trying it. Sees condescension in everything. Gately points out that maybe the condescension Day is seeing is actually just Gately's impatience with himself for not finishing school and not being able to keep up with Jeffrey Day. Gately's quote, "Brother, that's just all I know to tell you. That's work for me. I know for me, it don't matter if there's days I fucking hate it. I just have to do it. And it don't help me or anybody else if I go around negativing on newcomers and trying to take out my issues on trying to fuck them up with God puzzles." God, describes such a specific person. Let me just finish this last little paragraph I have here. Jeffrey Day bitches about the meetings, all being about needing more meetings forever, though no enlightenment is promised at any point. Donkey and carrot. I actually made the point here with a lot of this that it's kind of, are you familiar with the bell curve?
Yes.
Okay, so for those who don't know, The Bell Curve was a very controversial book written in like the 80s or 90s, and it was pretty much like the first of those, like, well, actually, if you go by a group, whites have, Asians have the highest IQ, and whites have the medium, and blacks have the lowest IQ. And I'm actually, I'll be very upfront with you guys. Again, mentioning I came from a racist family. I might have gone through a little bit of an alt-right thing in my early 20s. Shocked face. Now, listen, let me be very specific.
Busted. No,
That's all right. Now, when I was first reading it, the alt-right thing, it seemed like the appeal was, it was kind of like a conservatism without religion, which in the Bush years was, it was everything evangelical, as opposed to now where it's been kind of laid bare in its ugly, ugly truth. But yeah, at that time, I'd come out of an Ayn Rand phase. It's a lot of that suburban bullshit, like, yeah, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps, which was my own personal motivation that, like, yes, I can get out of this life where, my stepfather is an alcoholic carpenter and my dad is in a biker gang. And no, I can make something of myself. And then once you have the first disappointment in life, you realize, oh, all of that was full of shit. But I mentioned The Bell Curve specifically in that it reminded me very much of Jeffrey Day in that, when people like, because I will still go on like 4chan and Reddit and a lot of like really far right, but just to see what the fucking animals are saying to each other. And anytime they bring up this IQ shit, again, it's like, okay, well, maybe a random series of tests showed different races had different IQs. What does that mean? Like, it would seem to suggest, oh, maybe IQ tests are bullshit. But the thing you always want to throw out to somebody, like, okay, let's just say in some random world, that's the truth. Then what? What are you saying from there? Does this make you and your mediocrity better? No, it doesn't. You're a dickhead calling out a stat that means nothing because you're trying to build yourself up and you have nothing to actually add. You're not helping.
Right. Like, what's your IQ, douchebag?
Exactly. What the fuck does it mean if, like, the smartest white guy at Harvard has the same fucking, also gets as bad a sunburn as you do? All right? Fuck you. That doesn't mean anything. You're a goddamn idiot. So, once again, disavow all that bullshit. I'm always working to better myself. But, oh yeah, it seems more like it means IQ tests don't mean shit, but you're choosing to interpret this as some way that makes you smarter because you're on the winning team, which is very much what he's doing here. I have some other stuff about AA. I have a friend who is very averse to AA because his mother took him to it all the time when he was young. She had the problem, and she eventually relapsed and passed away, unfortunately. But a lot of the things you hear there is like people criticize it, like, oh, well, most people who go to AA end up using again, which I think is such a bullshit thing to say, to act like people who go to AA, if they relapse once, it's all been for nothing. When relapse is exactly like, if you think of like a cure for cancer that only works 69% of the time and some people will have cancer for 6 months again, would you ever throw the fuck away that miracle drug because, like, oh, well, it didn't help the other 31%, so I guess let's just not use that?
I mean, if I take anything from this book, it's that, like, it seems like AA is an American treasure, right? It's like one thing we can be proud of as a society. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. God, again, just more and more notes about cliches, which, again, I love cliches because they convey simple, condensed wisdom to complex problems in just a few words. So, Gately often feels a terrible sense of loss, narcotics-wise, in the AM, still, even after this long, clean. I actually had something very similar recently. I haven't smoked cigarettes in 5 years, and me and my girlfriend watched The Crow the other day, and the mix of, like, high school goth bullshit and I could instantly taste, like, delicious cigarettes, like, before homeroom in my junior year again. It felt so good.
Anytime I watch Mad Men, I'm like, I gotta fucking get a pack of cigarettes.
I've heard that. I have heard people say that Mad Men made them try smoking.
Exactly.
Oh my God, we're just monkeys. We're
I know.
just monkeys in suits. And, yeah, his sponsor says some people never get over.
We'll get.
Sorry, this actually has not happened before. Okay, now what happened? Literally, as soon as everything stopped freezing and I could see you again, the audio stopped working. But it's
Damn
okay.
it.
No, it was only for a second. It was just what you were just starting to say. But we're recording again, so we should be good.
Okay, cool. No, I was just saying that the disability is in direct contrast with people like Oren, who are really physically able and yet who are very, very sad. And yet you see people like the AFR who, I mean, they too are very physically able. There's a really Tarantino-esque scene coming down the pike with AFR where it's like very violent and they're able to, you know, climb walls and fight physically and do all these different things. But anyway, I just feel like there must be something there, especially with the contrast of Oren and Mario being not physically as able as Oren is, and yet having a happier, more fulfilled life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's been noted on that, like, Mario seems to be the only good, kind person in the book, despite being described as, like, you know, terribly deformed. But
the way DFW also describes like these quote unquote deformities is a little bit like a knife in the heart. I feel like it's like he always talks about like these. Yeah, exactly. He uses the word deformities, which is kind of, you know, not PC, but yeah.
Well, it's that in and of itself is a little bit of the cliche. I mean, going back to Quasimodo, it's like, who's the real monster, that type of thing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think I might have to try to find somebody who's a little differently abled or disabled. Everybody has different takes on which term they like there. But just, I could just think of my ex, because I remember one of the big things she pointed out that I think really needs to be out there more in the real world is that we have this image of like the person who's like, oh, they're healthy and in shape, their legs just don't work, whereas that is such like a small like very good chance if that doesn't work you have all kinds of issues. Like so many people who are in wheelchairs have like their damage everywhere, but you just assume like, oh, their legs don't work. Like for example, my ex, she actually used a wheelchair to get around. She could use her legs, you know, fine. She had a connective tissue disorder where like it would fuck up if she walked for too long. It would just like, okay, well, for that half-hour walk, I am now done for the day. But yeah, that's I don't know. That's a little cliche. I think other people could get it. Just the thing is, when I dated her, not to get too far into it, but this is a good moment to actually do something nice. I would actually say that's a big part of the reason that got me out of that lack of empathy in my early 20s, because I met a lot of people who were, you know, that's another problem with disabled people is like you don't get to see most of them. They're stuck at home and they're living very quiet, lonely lives. And I wish we could do more for them. That's enough of my little bullshit there. God, that is such a guy thing. Like, yeah, that's enough of my bullshit about caring and paying attention to people. Anyway, back to important things. We have Gately observes a man named Lenz and what he's teaching Gately. In this case, it's tolerating and helping someone you want to pummel on sight. Lenz is threatened by Day because he's glib and a teacher, and Lenz thinks of himself as a kind of hipply sexy artist intellectual. Small-time dealers never conceptualize themselves as small-time dealers, kind of like whores never do. We can get to the women thing here. I have my little thing here. Ooh, okay. I wrote something not very nice here, but my note here was like very good take. The way people who are very open-minded sexually never seem to realize they're also big-time drug users who have long established sticking things in their body with little concern of the effect it would have on them. I don't think that's supposed to be as bad as I wrote it. Guys, I was a different person last Thursday when I wrote this. I've got some real soul searching.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I do think so. Here's the thing on women, okay, real fast. I do feel like David Foster Wallace does this thing where he puts women in one of two buckets. It's either I would fuck her or I wouldn't fuck her. And it's very clear, typically, upon meeting a female character, which bucket she belongs into. So Charlotte Treat is very clearly in the bucket of like, we wouldn't fuck her.
Right.
Something that we learned about Avril later in these pages is that she actually is someone we would fuck, because she is, really has this like sexy assassin side. And she's like very like, I don't know, later on in the book, they talk about her voice and how all the boys at the school really have a crush on her. And so that does kind of bother me, because I just think it's the treatment of women is a little bit two dimensional. But yeah, that's all I'll say about it. I won't go on like a long rant.
Okay. Yeah, no, I definitely, again, this is something that immediately comes to mind with comedy, just because, again, it's a thing I know where women do have a little, obviously there's the whole bullshit, like, women aren't funny, which assholes who haven't looked very hard have thought out. But I have heard one, I think it was Christina Pajitsky saying, like, you need to decide from, like, moment one when you go out there, like, you need to present yourself like, am I, like, a mother figure? Am I a buddy figure? Or am I, oh, you probably want to fuck me figure? And you kind of need to figure that out from jump, which is...
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Do not envy women in that regard.
There is another thing that came up in terms of Mildred Bonk, just for like Infinite Jest nerds. This is something that I realized, is that she, we learn now that Bruce G, who was in love with her, that we actually read a passage on, I think it was like on page 50, she comes back up here in the form of a tattoo on his, I don't know where it is, on his tricep.
Right, yeah. This is his second reappearance. We've just seen him kind of lurking in the background at Enfield.
Exactly. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh, so we have here, Gately notices, this is another thing on women, notices Charlotte Treat and her needlepoint. She used to be a prostitute, is now reformed. He remarks how prostitutes who go straight always get prim, like long repressed librarian ambitions come flooding out.
No comment.
Gately is 29 and huge, looks less built and more poured concrete. Massive square head with a Prince Valiant haircut that he cuts himself. Gately doesn't care for Narcotics Anonymous so much. Too many relapses, too many war stories told with non-disguised bullshit pride. Rampant newcomer fucking. That's known in AA and NA. It's called the 13th step. That's why I'm, as far as war stories, I have a buddy of mine. He has a special on Amazon Prime called It's Fine. That is Joe White. His thing is nothing but war stories. It's great. He's a very funny guy. Again, that is It's Fine by Joe White. I believe it's still on Amazon Prime. Gately is partial to what worked for him. Tough love. This I like. I can identify with this. Tough love, old guys with suspenders and white crew cuts and massive successful sober eras who will take your head right off if they sense you're getting complacent or chasing pussy or forgetting that your life still hangs in the balance every fucking day. Something about a no bullshit, older, middle-aged man just... Like, if an old man comes up to me on the street out of nowhere and just says, hey, I'm not having any of your goddamn shit, I got my fucking eyes on you, I will do anything he tells me to do. That is from having... I
love the crocodiles.
Yeah, the crocodiles. That's what... Okay. So I have a whole thing here that fucking annoys me, which is, why wasn't this shit on page 50? Why did I have to read, thank you, 270 pages to get to this awesome, like, oh my God, it's character motivation and growth and something resembling a hero who seems to be moving in a direction and struggling with things. Why the fuck have I gone through so much of this book and this is just happening now?
Dude, you took the words right out of my mouth. And especially, I know that, I don't know if you've gotten to this part, but when they talk about the convexity and they talk about the president and the political situation, I was like, hello, like, where was this 250 pages ago?
Right. Like, I wonder if this isn't part of the reason people get so obsessive over this book, as opposed to just being like, oh, I like that book. Because there is a kind of a, Okay, you know what? The thing that's in the news right now is Trump's niece has written a book on why Trump is such a, how he's gotten away with so much shit. And her particular take is that he's such a bullshit artist that like sells people like, yeah, I'm going to fix whatever you want. And then once you're involved with him, it takes like everybody's doubled down so much that it would cost you so much to say, oh, this guy was full of shit and I've been had, which partly makes me wonder if like this is just so set up to set up a reward in the brain that the fact you had to hunt and peck so long for this good thing that so many people like, I had this conversation with somebody that like, there's two kinds of people when you read this book. If you read it and you see like these weird terms you never heard anywhere, some people think like, ooh, neat. This is a little treasure hunt for me to find. And the thing I've been having when I'm looking through this and I see a weird word and I look up the definition and it says awkwardly skinny. It's like, fuck you for not just saying awkwardly skinny. Go fuck yourself, Wallace.
I think for me, I'm probably the person that's reading it saying, okay, this is a puzzle for myself. And that's how I get through it. Because otherwise I feel like I'd be like, if I looked at it as entertainment, I would say, fuck this. Because I don't find it particularly entertaining. But one thing I did tell you initially in our Instagram conversation was it does feel like the guy that's mean to me. So now I become obsessed with it. Like there is breadcrumbing and I'm like, okay, well, like maybe he likes me now and like maybe it's going to be different now. And then we go to the next page and it's like a, description that's 3 pages long about the architecture of the Enfield Tennis Academy. And I'm like, oh, fuck, maybe he doesn't love me,
Yeah. Oh God. It is a little bit like that. Like, yeah, read 4 pages on the specs of a film cartridge. I love you, you dumb bitch. Here's some shit about Gately and how he's struggling inside. Oh God.
Yep.
But, like,
I'm a sucker. We're suckers.
Like, the thing, this is not good structure. I mean, like, dress it up however you like. If you put like a kid's birthday present on the roof, yes, the kid will love the toy all the more for having gone the distance to get it, but you're still a piece of shit for putting it on the roof, Oh God.
It's the Sierpinski triangle, okay, Jesse?
I had somebody message me the other day offering to really explain the Sierpinski gasket. I might have them on the show. I don't know if I'm quite enough of a masochist for that yet, but we will see. Okay, Gately thinks about Day and what he'd like to tell him about cliches, that they're soothing, they remind you of common sense, they drown out the silence, and the silence is deadly. Silence is the space that the spider, which he refers to as addiction, naturally seeks to fill. I honestly get that. That's why when I drink, I'm not a day drinker. I drink at night because my boredom needs to be beaten into the ground for me to get to sleep. Lens and Day motherfuck each other, both hoping to instigate something. Day is certain to push just against the boundary without ever bleeding over it, which would surely result in an ass kicking for him. Okay, that is that little section there. All right. Next chunk, we have the returning from the Long Island matches against Port Washington, 281 to 299. John Wayne and Hal only lost 5 total games between them. I messed that up. Shacked lost to a kid with terrible, debilitating nerves. Stacked wasn't upset, and it was remarked upon by the staff. Remember, this character has already decided to not pursue tennis professionally. Pemulus won a set after his opponent had gotten strangely lethargic and disoriented, was escorted off the field, giving Pemulus the VD, victory by default, after the opponent claimed the tennis balls were too pretty to hit. This is nice foreshadowing, because this is, of course, it seems as if Pemulus might have slipped this kid a little bit of the old DMZ there.
Oh, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together.
You missed that? I
thought maybe that's something that he was having a mental breakdown, which also wouldn't have been surprising for David Foster Wallace to just like slip into a tennis match. But wow.
Well, the specific getaway, the specific, whatever, the thing that gave it away, there we go. The thing that gave it away to me is that the tennis ball was too pretty to hit. And in his initial description of DMZ, how he mentioned that They used it on soldiers, and they became so passive and anti-aggressive. That's what it seems to be. This opponent was later seen at the post-meet mixers and dance, eating hors d'oeuvres with utensils and at one point without hands, and then telling the headmaster's wife how he always wanted to do her from behind. What a charming boy.
That part's so good.
They all board the bus and entertain themselves on the way home. Stitt is not on the bus, as he always finds a mysterious way back because he's always in a negative mood after wins. I know people like that. They're infuriating. A leaflet is passed around detailing players Keith Freer and Bernadette Longley, who'd been caught having sex under an Adidas blanket in the bus back in September. The pamphlet made its way to Bernadette, who buried her face in her hands and blushed, while the girls chastised the boys for being immature. And then they all go to Denny's at 12:30 a.m. As you can tell, I'm getting a little less introspective with the notes in this chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything in particular?
No, I thought it was interesting looking at what the people were reading. There's like really just like very random books that I've never heard of. So maybe something for the Infinite Jest nerd to look into and read. But that was it.
We get a bit of a bio on Oren. Oren got out of tennis when Mario was 11 and Hal was 9. He was no good and slugging it ranked in the 70s, which is the point where people have to decide whether to give up, live out a pathetic existence on some far-flung Eastern European, barely pro circuit. Yeah, you see that with basketball a lot. Well, I think everybody has that. Like, you can't cut in the NFL, so you go to the Canadian Football League, or, like in basketball, if you can't cut it in Asia, they love basketball, so they will take like any college guy who just could not go pro. Little detail, the poor pro rectors at Enfield, the third option of allowing graduates who can't cut the mustard to come back to help around the place for another year or two. They are seen as fuck-ups by the current Enfield students, a warning of what bottom feeding awaits you if you can't deliver appropriately. Some pro rectors are feared, but none are respected. They are seen as a purgatory. Yeah, the role is seen as purgatory that only prolongs personal failure. Brutal.
Wow.
Oren decided to attend college instead, which made his parents happy. His father was unsurprised, as much like Hal himself, Oren had experienced puberty late, which held him back as less skilled students simply outgrew his body's capabilities. By the time puberty hit, he never caught up. This has become a new fascination with me. I know a few people who hit puberty late, and it really affected everything about who they were, which makes sense. Like, if you're like a 16-year-old and suddenly, if you're a 16-year-old guy and all of a sudden everybody around you is huge and you're just, did you ever watch the show Freaks and Geeks?
No, I didn't.
Judd Apatow, pretty much everybody in it is famous now. But one of the things they noted on in the commentary is that like there's two sets of characters, one of them being sophomores and the other one being freshmen. And they said when they were casting, they really wanted to make sure they wanted to get a freshman who was the right age but looked like little kids to really highlight that, like, you go from middle school, you're going into high school, and suddenly, from your perspective, there are grown men and women walking around, and you are still like a child in all physical. Yeah. I remember that's actually why I got out of football, because I gained weight too quick and suddenly I went from being the biggest kid to being the shortest kid, and wasn't fun. Not fun.
Oh.
Oren points out he was well suited to college due to Enfield's academic rigors, which we mentioned Averill set up. Also points out that while his ranking was nowhere near good enough to go pro, his mediocrity was contextual and still pretty outstanding on a college admissions form, and pretty enticing to any college tennis coach in the country, which I guess is a thing where tennis players tend to go pro at 18. Decided that Boston University would be best for him. It would get him away from home while still making it easy for visit. CT had some connections and flew down to BU from Canada to sort out and make it so. Got to dictate his own scholarship after easily trouncing BU's best on the court. The fact that the coach couldn't take his eyes off his attractive mother certainly didn't hurt. I'm liking how Averill's coming out here.
Yeah, and Tavis too comes out in this chapter.
But they say that him coming down to set up this Boston University thing is part of what led him to coming down for good and taking over at Enfield after Yeah, after himself suicide, which again, we're finally getting to the Hamlet chunk of, the dad's
Yes.
gone and let me sneak in.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I love the diatribe, this internal diatribe that we have of Charles Tavis, talking about never expecting a thank you. I know we haven't gotten there yet, so I'll wait.
No, you could get into that now if you want.
Basically, it's a page and a half, which these pages are pretty big. Okay. So this is a long diatribe about how Charles Tavis never really expected a thank you. And if he did expect a thank you, that wouldn't have been a true act of service for his fellow man. And he talks about, how hard it was for him taking over Jim and Condenza's place, and how maybe Oren resents him. It's just this whole anxiety-ridden internal dialogue of this guy who basically slipped into, we think maybe he's Jim's brother. We're not really sure, but it seems kind of that way, or someone that was in the family. So it's kind of creepy.
Yeah, there's a lot of little incest things they're putting in here.
Yes, actually. Like, I mean, they even, when we get further into the football stuff, they talk about, oh man, it actually goes on for like two whole pages about the diatribe. But yeah, they talk about, there's definitely weird things happening with Oren and his mom as well. Him comparing her to Joelle. Yeah, we'll get into that.
Oren decided the third week of college to try football due to tennis exhaustion. Decided at 18 to become as good as a tennis player as he ever was destined to be. I actually like that. I like, okay, I hit a ceiling. I'm good now. It seems like with all of Oren's decisions, football, I just said orange. All of Oren's decision, football had to do with sex. He had fallen for a baton twirler who, again, little bit of treasure we find being revealed, little breadcrumb, a baton twirler that he'd nickname the prettiest girl of all time. She was so beautiful, she was almost shunned out of fear and anxiety and rejection. Again, that is another DFW thing. This actually reminds me very specifically, I don't remember the character's name, but she was in the book Dead-Eyed Dick by Kurt Vonnegut, who she was from like the poor side of town, but she was so pretty, and she was just annoyed by how I think she said, like, if I die and go to heaven, I want to know what the hell was written on my face that people wouldn't stop reading it.
Eye roll. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
they also talk about Oren and Condenza, who, like many children of raging alcoholics and OCD sufferers, had internal addictive sexuality issues. So they call out very specifically here that Oren is a sex addict.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Do you have anything there just about women in general? Just because this isn't even directly in it. I think of this as a guy, like the odd occasion where I catch like a gay guy checking me out and just how strange and odd it feels. And then to realize like, oh, I look at women like that all the time. God, that has to be exhausting.
I mean, I think, again, we're putting women in a bucket. We have now identified very early on that Joelle is a pretty girl. She's actually the prettiest girl of all time. And then when we get into her characterization, it's like, oh, but she actually has this like dark side. And it's like the whole thing is, in terms of cliches, like this is as cliche as you get when it comes to a female love object, in my opinion. Someone who can be rescued, someone who's beautiful, and even when you get into like her film affiliations, like the types of films she likes, Oren swoops in and introduces her to film that's artsy and deep instead of what she's been watching, which is more of like action films and things that are very entertaining. And so the whole thing is a little eye-rolly, in my opinion.
Okay, and we're back 24 hours later. I had to cancel the last recording for reasons I'm sure I will talk about in the intro plenty. We're back with Charlotte Mark. How you doing?
Good. How are you? Ready for round two?
Ready for round two, definitely. Okay, so we left off on the PGOAT Joelle, the prettiest girl of all time, and how she was so beautiful. She was almost shunned out of fear and anxiety of rejection. Again, David Foster Wallace working through some issues. Um, okay, so pretty much the big reason Oren leaves tennis, gave up tennis just out of exhaustion from years and years of work, was mainly attracted to football because, of course, cheerleaders and baton twirlers not known to be cheering on the tennis players. Football, however, yes. We talked before about how Avril, Oren's mother, has like an immense beauty that really destroys the men around her, much like Joelle. And that when Oren quit the tennis team, his coach wept and pathetically asked if this meant his mother wouldn't come to watch the practices anymore.
Yep.
That poor guy.
That poor guy.
Oren's tryouts for football went terrible. His magnetic repulsion to any kind of physical interaction with the other players was extreme. Was flat out grabbed by the face mask by a coach and directed to leave the field. There's a little paragraph here on just the nature of destiny that I really liked a lot. The overall gist being that destiny is 99% the random winds of change and 1% the actual willpower you devote to molding it. Quote, destiny has no beeper. Destiny always leans trench-coated out of an alley with some sort of psst that you usually can't even hear. You're in such a rush to or from something you've tried to engineer. I like that a lot. Do you have anything like that in your life?
Yeah, pretty much everything, I would say. I think it was it Paul McCartney that said, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And I think that that's very, these kind of statements seem really parallel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. And not only just like grabbing things like, that's actually a huge chunk of my work history. I mean, I went to school for radiology, and yet my first like job I had after college was some friends of mine decided to make a movie, and I just stuck up my hand and said, "Oh, I'll do the music for it." And then I composed the soundtrack to 3 movies in 6 years, and like that's it. Not at all what I expected to do, but okay, I'll take that.
Yeah. Well, I was studying literature 8 years ago, and now I'm selling software. So there you go.
There you go. That's that. That is that important college degree that we're told you can't live without, and end up not using. My
emails are really good though. So
there you go. You can see the student debt in those emails.
They're very eloquent. Okay.
Okay, so what happened was, or I guess if I want to be a dickhead, I should say, what happened was, while Oren was walking off the field, an over-enthusiastic special teams lineman fucked up and snapped the punter's leg in two. The ball had landed near Oren. The coach demanded it back. It was too far to throw, and he didn't want to walk it back. So, without ever having kicked a football in his life, he kicked the football back, and it soared majestically. This is actually foreshadowed in the description. Dave Foster Wallace has like telling us the particular style of tennis a lot of the players played. And apparently Oren, while not that great, was known to have a phenomenal lob that supposedly he could arc it to hug the sides of the Enfield lung and strike a large coin precisely on the other side of the court, which of course would be a natural instinct for a punter. Apparently back then, Stitt and the other old Enfield types watched a cartridge of him and determined he was just using his same over-reliance on lobbing and applied it to punting. His overcompensation for his lack of improvement in tennis was now being rewarded by a special teams niche play in football. I really like that payoff, that he spent so much time talking about how people who hit plateaus and can't get to the next level of skill. They tend to like overcompensate by honing to death the one skill they really do have.
Yeah, and it's also just really funny to see all the hate he gets from these other tennis people who are
Yeah.
just like, who constantly ask how, how's your brother who just kicks a ball for a living? It's just like really funny to hear that commentary throughout the book.
And the important thing, and now that he had Joelle, the baton girl, to pine for, he had a renewed motivation that tennis hadn't provided in years. So I'm going to start something new this week. We have our word of the week. Yeah. As I discussed, some people see these new words and say, oh, neat. And other people see it and say, oh, go fuck yourself, David Foster Wallace, with a hot sauce soaked bandana. This might be the curse words we were talking about.
I know.
So, this week's word is phoneme. That is Phoneme, regarding Oren's wordless courtship with Joelle. Quote, Oren's life took bilateral route at a distance during games without one exchanged personal phoneme. Webster's dictionary defines phoneme as a unit of sound that distinguishes one word from another in a particular language. I actually had to look this up. So the best example I could think of is overpronouncing every small letter in a word. So cat, C-A-T. If you were to pronounce the phonemes, you would say cat. So please enjoy that sharing that piece of information with your cat, who is the only creature that finds you tolerable because they don't have to speak with you. Okay.
They also, I will say, use it in linguistics to define, like, so for example, within England, they have a wide variety of different, for a language that is widely distributed throughout England, it sounds very different in different regions. And so one person who maybe has a Cockney accent would say tube instead of the tube, whereas another person who has more of a posh accent would say tube, and so they say that's a different phoneme. So.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware that was actually in popular use somewhere.
It's like a linguistical term. I would say unless you're a sociologist studying linguistics, you probably wouldn't know what that term was. But I did take linguistics, so I know what it is. But I don't think that anyone else. I would never use that in like common day language.
Right. You wouldn't use that to describe a punter falling in love with a baton twirler, perhaps.
No, I wouldn't use that language.
Well, that's why you and I are not MacArthur Genius recipients. So
right.
Okay. Joelle approaches Oren one day, asking him to sign a ball he'd kicked the air out of that had landed in the marching band section and had been passed along to her. She wanted him to sign it for her dad. Oren said football was about more than the sport. He loved the response of 30,000 people cheering all at once. I do like the comparison here, how tennis was so muted in that it's like the applause was slight and even frowned upon. He loved that it was so loud out there he literally could not hear himself think, to escape himself in a way he never could on the court. That is a great description.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's actually something I really miss from playing in bands, that you can kind of like, obviously it's a little different. You're hiding within the sound you're creating, but yeah, you get kind of like isolation chambered a little bit in the sensation.
Yeah, and I think you see the difference in classes here too. He comes from this tennis background, which is kind of people golf clapping, and then he goes to this other culture, which is like
very populist.
Everyone goes after the game and drinks beer in a bar and that sort of thing, which you can tell that Avril isn't thrilled about him going in this direction.
Yeah. Do you have anything specific there? I think I actually missed that note about. I know there's a general thing where like the moms was kind of like, "Well, we support you, whatever you do," and I think the dad actually kind of supported it a little bit.
Yeah, there's a comment saying Avril made it clear that the very last thing she wanted was to have any of her children feel that they had to justify or explain to her of any sort of abruptly or even bizarrely sudden major decision they may happen to make. And there's little like jabs there where she kind of passive aggressively is like, well, this is really bizarre, but you do you, which I think is really funny. But yeah, there's a couple of little things like that come out that are one-liners, but it isn't pervasive.
Okay. So he and Joelle moved in together off campus. I actually reread this a few times. Like, did I miss a line here? Because it went from like she signed a football to they moved in together. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah. So
seems like it happened pretty fast. Yeah,
okay.
And then I think something that we may have mentioned in part one is that Oren is kind of comparing her to the mom. She made moms look like the sort of piece of fruit you think you want to take out of the bin, but then once you're right there over the bin, you put it back because from close up you can see much fresher and less preserved seeming piece of fruit elsewhere in the bin, which is weird to compare your mom and your girlfriend to two fruits in a grocery store. And then he also talks about the stadium being like the womb and being amniotic. So I'm seeing major mommy issues here. And then, it seems like his relationship goes really fast.
Okay. A great line here, quote, "The all-new inconveniences of being publicly stellar at a major sport in a city where people beat each other to death in bars over stats and fealty." That is in relation to Boston, but from where I broadcast in Port Richmond, Philadelphia, we know that quite a bit.
That's I feel like another little class jab from DFW.
By the way, where are you at? I don't think I asked you that at all. I have no idea.
In Austin, Texas.
Oh, okay. You know what's funny? I had a Facebook memory come up today from a cross-country trip I went on where, not Austin, in Amarillo, Texas, were the photos that popped up. This is okay.
It's horrifically hot here right now. I can barely survive. So
yeah, it's like 97 degrees in Pennsylvania. I can only imagine what it's like in the literal desert of Texas.
Yeah, it's like the bowels of hell for sure.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Joelle had done the midnight Thanksgiving dinner at Enfield and met Avril, and Oren went to Kentucky with Joelle for Christmas and met her parents and endured her father's complete lack of smiling. Oren had wired his friends to tell them he was in love. We find out Joelle started cocaine around his freshman year on New Year. He actually found he had a weird thrill out of being sober while she got high, to be with someone feeling at their max freedom and being the only person they want to enjoy that feeling with. Okay, that's a little... All right.
Mommy issues.
Yeah.
Weird. Okay.
Joelle had decided to change her major to film. Her favorite genre was unpretentious blockbusters where a lot of shit blows up. Like that. Oren once told her it was strange watching big movies with a girl who was prettier than the girls on screen. He really seems to compare her to everybody else, as opposed to oh, you're so swell. It's like, you're a lot sweller than the people on screen or my mommy or a piece of fruit, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's less of a comparison and more of him just being so obsessed with her and him holding her on such a high pedestal that it's like, you're hotter than Megan Fox, and it's like, okay, it's a lot to take on, I feel like, for another person.
Yeah. Okay. Oren introduced her to avant-garde filmmaking, which became a minor obsession. He showed her some of his father's films, James and Candanza himself, who began to slowly use her in films, a hand here, a foot there. This, however, was the beginning of the end, as Joelle declined to return to BU, instead to film more with himself, while Oren stayed behind to play football. Joelle quit twirling and started filming experiments instead, primarily filming Oren's punts. Oren found the footage of himself punting enchanting, so much so that it often gave him an erection while watching himself.
Yeah. Narcissism at its finest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've watched some footage of myself. Arousing would not be the word I would think of. More obsessive detailing over faults and flaws, more accurately. I don't know.
Right. And I don't even know if it's so much arousal at him, but it's arousal at him imagining her watching him or something.
Okay, I guess there could be said that it's a little bit of like seeing as how she's actually running the equipment. It's a little bit of watching himself through her eyes.
Right. Like I think that he's so obsessed with her that even seeing her perspective is arousing to him.
Okay. I could get that. It's weird. I could get behind that a little bit.
This is me defending Oren, but yeah, it's weird. Whatever way you slice it, it's weird.
And that is all the notes I have for this section. Do you have anything I might have missed?
No. I mean, I just that I think it's I think it's funny that he finds it necessary to correct her taste in film with more avant-garde stuff. And then I do think that we start seeing some more incestuous things happening where, you know, Jim Incandenza clearly is starting to have a liking to her, and we don't really know where that's going yet, but that's a little bit of foreshadowing around, you know, what his relationship is going to be like with her. And I think that's it.
Okay, yeah, that definitely is a weird foreboding of, you know, your father being interested in your girlfriend. Like, oh, let me show you a thing or two down in my studio where the magic happens. So
right, and specifically filming her hand or foot, like this kind of obsession with little parts of her and filming those is very sexual in my opinion. And I also think there is some weirdness around her calling her father her personal daddy, which feels
it's
like what you would call your like older hot boyfriend or something. So yeah, I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but that all of that does feel very Hamletian, in that Hamlet becomes very obsessed with his mother and father's relationship. There's weird things happening throughout that play in other relationships that feel a little bit incestuous as well. And so I think that that's coming through in some of these sections.
Okay. All right. Now, real quick, how far ahead are you right now? I'm only ahead like 30 pages on this.
I'm on page 520.
Oh, God. Okay.
So honestly, not that much farther.
How is it? Do you think you've enjoyed more where you've read after this point or before this point?
So after, for sure.
Okay.
I do think that part of the allure of Infinite Jest is that it makes the reader feel smart and accomplished, which I think is why it resonates with certain people that have that identification of themselves as an academic or as smart. So I will say that when I'm like carrying around Infinite Jest, I like feel, you know, like I feel some sort of way about myself.
I feel intelligent. I feel intellectual. Right. I feel safe because it's big enough to use as a weapon and to bludgeon people who would do me harm.
I have something that would be of use in multiple different contexts. But would I read it again? I'm not really sure. And I think This Is Water is like a perfectly condensed version of what he's trying to say in this book in 20 minutes. So.
Okay. See, that's part of the thing that I had going into this, because it's, God, the people who love this book, they're really like, you know, oh, well, it helps if you have a dictionary next to you the entire time. Like, that sounds horrible. But then they try to, well, actually, it's so much better the second time. Like, you are not selling me on the first one, you know? There's nothing.
Right. Or when they go into the French, or then they use these Latin phrases, like instead of suicide, they say felo de se. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. Like, I don't know the Latin word for suicide, you know? So yeah, that has been also, I mean, thankfully I know a little bit of French, but for someone who doesn't know French, like that becomes difficult. So yeah, I do think it's purposefully a bit alienating. But I'm determined to finish this thing. I'm going to finish this thing.
Nice.
And I'll let you know what I think after.
Okay. See, I'm coming up. I think I have about 100 pages more, and then I'll be where I was at. I'll be at my high water mark where I gave up the first time when I was like 23.
Dude, you got far before giving up. Like, I'm surprised that you threw in the hatchet at page whatever 400.
Well, I was determined because, again, the whole thing with this podcast, I know it has the title "I Hate Infinite Jest." I don't actively hate it. It's just, an intriguing name that makes some people want to check it out. It makes other people send me very angry messages that are,
you've been fooled, listener.
Exactly. But for me, it was just I didn't understand the appeal, and that drove me crazy because there are things I see out that people that are interested in that I don't like. I'm not a big fan of hip hop music, and that's just because I come from such a big rock and roll background and 20th century music that this was just so different. I can't really get my arms around it, but I can get what other people like about it. This book I read almost halfway through, and I didn't even understand its appeal, let alone what was happening. So that's the entire purpose of this podcast, is finding out what am I missing out on.
Right. I mean, the writing is killer. So for someone who really cares about prose, I think he's a phenomenal writer. There's no getting around that. But I do think that the way things are strung together is interesting. But who knows? I mean, like, we don't know until we finish, right? We can't make a judgment call. So and I'm just plowing through.
The big thing I keep saying is it is getting better as I go. Which to me just makes it so much more annoying. Like, oh, you had the ability to make this good from page 1, but you decided to fuck with me. So,
or you've acclimated to the world at this point. That's the other thing that people say, is at a certain point you are acclimated to his style of writing, which makes it's almost like you're now a part of this language, or understand the language that he's writing in, and now you have a better understanding to kind of attack the rest of the book in a way that may be more enjoyable.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to disagree, but for a very specific reason. So the whole reason we had to stop yesterday was that I had slotted about an hour to record with you, and an hour has been more than sufficient. Unfortunately, what happened was we hit that hour, and we still had a good amount of notes left. So as somebody who's summarizing as I go and you can't see, but I am gesturing towards my other laptop that I have been slaving over right this. In the early chunk of the book, there are like chunks of 7 to 8 pages at a time that you can summarize in like a paragraph. Whereas now, to actually keep track of what's happening and what's important, there's a lot of fluff in the beginning, which I know some people would think of as world building, but like that chunk where he just talks about like the technical specs of a film cartridge viewer, it's just, it doesn't, like, I can look up a VCR if I want to. I don't need this.
There's got to be a reason for that. There has to be, like, he's testing the reader. There's a barrier to entry to get in, or there has to be. I think that honestly, there is a method to the madness, whether or not we agree to it, but I'm curious to kind of retroactively look at this and say what my hypothesis is on that. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think some of the sections in the beginning are very weird.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the important thing is we're on the path and we're getting there. So
we're getting there.
Charlotte Mark, thank you again very much for doing this episode with me. It's been.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Yes. Again, thank you for being cool with me just dropping the recording in the middle of it yesterday. Yeah, again, where can we find you on social media or anything you feel like promoting?
No, at Charlotte J. Mark, you guys can say hi there, but otherwise, no.
Yeah, otherwise leave her alone.
Otherwise, leave me alone.
While we're here, do you have what's like a favorite book of yours or something? Like, recommend something to us. How about that?
I like Donna Tartt. I like, female writers. So I like the Secret History. Have you heard of that?
I have not, but after Cousin Frank on episode 6, where he said he was really trying to dedicate himself to reading books by people that do not look like him, I think I actually want to start leaning in that direction when I realized that pretty much all my favorite authors were old, white, male, and dead. So,
which I love the old white male and dead also. So no hate coming from me, but I do love her writing. In The Secret History, she writes in the voice of a man, which I think is very interesting. And she also does that in her most recent book, The Goldfinch, which had a little bit more critical acclaim and was more widely spread. It became a movie.
Okay, yeah, I heard
so
that.
yeah, that book is phenomenal also. I've heard the movie wasn't great, but I really love her. I mean, I read the Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante. They were fabulous. I mean, I would say that those lean, it's about a like female relationship kind of going throughout the years. Her writing is phenomenal. Her storytelling is phenomenal. I don't know. Those are like the books like I've really loved recently. But I also will just read Sally Rooney every once in a while just to get some, like, I don't know if you've read any of her stuff, but
Nah.
it's like, yeah, it's like softcore, Irish porn kind of.
Okay.
I mean, it's like really, I've peppered that into Infinite Jest. It's highbrow, but I've
Okay.
peppered that into Infinite Jest just as like
Highbrow,
something really quick that I can
softcore.
read.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, Charlotte, thank you very much. I am going to stop recording, but we can still talk for a second or two. Goodbye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.